Right.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Work in Progress with the Reno Collective. This is our weekly live show where we talk about work, life, everything in between from Reno Collective Co-working. I forgot to turn down the music, so sorry about that. It's like, why am I shouting? And so welcome. It has been an interesting day. We were trying to decide whether or not we should mention it just because we are a live show. We can't just ignore what's going on today. And I think it will have a lot to do with what we're talking about, which is I think a lot of people probably felt a little unproductive today, and that's okay. There's things happen, the life happens, and we need to be able to kind of take a step back and evaluate and move forward. And so today we are actually going to be talking about things to make you more productive and focus on your goals, but which is something that I know that we've been kind of doing a disclaimer on in most of our episodes because yes, we're still in a pandemic. Yes, there are a lot of things going on with politics right now, civil unrest, things like that. But when you do have that clear headspace to be able to sit down and think and be productive, then we want to give you the tools to do that. So so welcome, Rachel.
Right. Yes. Hi, I'm here. Thinking about that, we originally this was going to be a little bit of a focus on the fact that we're trying to work from home and be productive, and so there's that element of sort of a spin to it of focusing on what we can do while we're in a space that might not be the most effective space for us, or efficient, I should say. And and then so today dropped out of the sky, and it has been a very full day of distractions. So I'm really excited to be here right now because we can at least put that aside in about 10 seconds. We're just going to lay it over there.
Yes.
And dig in.
Pick it back up after the show. But,
okay.
So what we're talking about today is time management, but not just why you should track your time and how it works, but also how you can actually use it to make a difference in your goals, in your projects, in your life, right? And so we are gonna tease a little something first, which is that we have our first kind of giveaway that we're going to be doing that ties in very nicely, and that is for a Timemuller time tracker, which we will talk about in a little bit. But that is from Sue Ting, one of our awesome owners, members, community members, just all around awesome person. So thanks for donating that for the giveaway. And a lot of members really love using Timemuller to do time tracking. So we'll definitely jump into how it works and what it works with. But I think the big thing is just to comment the word time in the chat, either YouTube or Twitch, and your name will get added to the giveaway, and then we'll do that towards the end of the show. So in the interest of time, we'll push forward. So why are we talking about time tracking?
We're talking about time tracking because it is incredibly important. So I know one thing that it helps me do is to set priorities. So knowing how much time I'm spending on something versus how I'm managing time. I think those are also sort of two different things. What you're putting into it, what you're taking out of it. That's a lot of what we'll be talking about in a little bit. I think it's like I said, for me, setting priorities. And again, there's a lot of tools and such to use, or techniques, I guess I should say, to use in order to figure out how you can manage and track your time. But yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's hard to figure out what you're putting into something, or hard to maximize what you get out of something if you don't know what you're putting in.
Yeah, I think it being a new year, a lot of people are really focused on resolutions right now, and those might be personal or business resolutions for if you're an employee or you're running your own business. And most of the time, I mean, we're going to do a little bit of New Year's resolution bashing, but most of the time people don't follow through on those, and it's because they haven't set themselves up to succeed, right? A goal, a resolution is really a goal. And so most of the time people are thinking like the finish line, but not all the steps that get you to that finish line.
Exactly.
And we're going to talk about a framework to get you there. There's a quote that neither of us, I'm sure if we Google it, we'll probably find like 5 different attributions for it, but basically
Right.
it's show me your calendar and I'll show you your priorities. And
Hmm.
I've heard this also, like, show me your bank statement and I'll show you your priorities, right? It's the
Yeah.
things that we spend our time and our money on, probably the things that are our priorities at any given time. And so
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing to think about. And that doesn't mean that we're going to be telling you to go add a bunch of things onto your calendar, because I think what calendars do in time tracking and time management is they show an ideal state, they show what you hoped to do. They don't actually
Right.
show you what happened. And we want
Right.
to
Well,
know what happened.
exactly. And then sometimes when you look at what happened, you realize it's not a real priority. You realize what you've prioritized, except that wasn't actually the priority for the day. So reevaluating your priorities also comes into that time, or time management comes into how you reevaluate your priorities. So why are you spending so much time doing X, Y, and Z in your calendar or however, and when your actual priority is saving money for a house or, et cetera.
Yeah, and like that one, I think, I mean, we talk about it, I think, on every episode, but Atomic Habits we'll mention again later. But it is that, small incremental change. It's the only way change ever happens. Everyone thinks it's this big, huge jumps that get you there. But to, like, save for a house, for example, you can't just be like, oh, I want a house in 2 years, so in, let's say, 18 months, we'll start working on that. And it's like, no, you have to start now and make those small incremental steps towards that.
Yep.
So yeah, and Sue's mentioning aiming for intentional priorities versus accidental priorities, which is definitely
Yes,
the case.
yes, exactly. Yeah, that's a much better way to put it than I did.
So for time tracking, I think most of the time people think of freelancers and needing to track time so that you can bill, right? A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people are hourly bill, and I think that's a good way to bill. We're not going to get into billing. We'll talk about that in another episode. But if you don't do hour billing, it's still crucial to track how much time and energy you spend on a project. So if you're a freelancer and you're doing fixed bid projects, you came up with that fixed bid based on some time amount and an hourly rate. And so,
or you sort of,
or you hopefully did, right?
Yeah.
But there is a certain amount
Might
of
have
money.
guessed at it, right?
Yeah, there's a certain amount of money that you still need to make to survive or hopefully thrive, right? And so you need to make sure that that project comes in under that time and under budget. Ideally, what the nice thing about fixed bid projects is if you come in under, that is something you get to keep. Whereas if you're doing hourly, yes, it could run over, it could go under. It's up to you to be a professional and manage that. But with fixed bid projects, they can be very, very good unless if you blow through your time on every single one of these, you're going to be wondering, like, why am I so busy? I have more projects than I've ever had.
Right. Like, coming from the public relations and marketing side, it's the same idea as a retainer.
Yep.
And part of it is needing to know where you put your time so you know how long something takes in order to build that retainer or that fixed bid.
Yeah, definitely. And this is what we're going to get into with that, is figuring out how much time it actually took, because humans are awful at estimating things. So even if you estimated this, especially your first project, you're going to get it wrong. But the important thing is we're going to look at how do we learn from that, adjust, and then the next one you can estimate a little bit better. The next one after that, you're like, okay, we got a little closer, but not quite. And then maybe the next one we learn from that. And then you might get a project that's completely different again, and you're back to square one, and you're like, I think it'll take this long, but I don't know. So definitely something to think about. So in this year, or I guess last year, right, this time is that there's been a lot less structure due to the pandemic, and so time tracking, even though it sounds very rigid, gives you freedom in that it actually creates a little bit of a schedule for you, creates some structure so that you know, like, I can actually put my computer away because I'm done for the day. Like, I hit my hours that I need, the rest can wait till tomorrow, type of thing. Instead, I think, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I guess during the pandemic, with work from home, the average work day actually got longer because people were getting stuff done, errands as well as work throughout the day.
Well, and I think this is also, where are we, month 9, 10 of the pandemic? And while this is a topic that I think a lot of people spent time researching in March, April, May, June, July. I think it's a good idea to revisit it right now, simply because we've been doing it for a while. And while there does seem like a light at the end of the tunnel is approaching with things like vaccines and such, it is something that we still need to optimize with, for how much time we're spending. It's not a stable thing. It's something that always has to be optimized and audited. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the last item we had there. So like most things, it does require auditing from time to time. So I would encourage this, especially like with things like your recurring expenses. What you're spending your money on should be audited every now and then. You should also audit what you're being busy about, right? I think freelancers especially, or if you're running your own business, you can get in that trap of working harder, not necessarily smarter, and you end up, working all the time, sacrificing all these things, but it's not enough to be busy. It's important to think about, like, what am I being busy about? And the framework we're going to talk about today is going to hopefully change the outlook from looking at goals and changing it to looking at habits, behaviors, and inputs. So this is a framework that I actually heard about on a podcast, and it just lined up because we already do this with some friends of mine, and we just unintentionally were doing it. And basically this framework from Amazon, they use it in all of their product management and project management, is an input-output framework. And so most people focus on the goal, and the easy one to think about is like New Year's resolutions would be like someone getting healthy or losing weight. And so many people track, a spreadsheet of their weight and their body fat percentage or something like that. That is an output. That is the buying the house. That is whatever the outcome is.
Mm-hmm.
The inputs are all the things, the behaviors that get you to that. And so instead, you should be making resolutions around the input. And to be honest, the input-output framework is mostly that. Like it's not rocket science. It's simply shifting the focus to, instead of me saying I'm going to lose 10 pounds, I'm going to do a certain number of steps every day. That's an input, right? Would be your steps.
Right.
Your activity level, your diet, your sleep, all of those are inputs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I think the first time we talked about this, it didn't make a whole ton of sense to me. I couldn't quite divide the input-output side. But I was thinking about it. There's like the output is the money that I'm saving. The input is not going to Starbucks, right?
Yeah, or making coffee at home, right? So
yes, exactly.
I think there's some subtleties in some ways of creating positive versus negative habits, right?
I was about to say, nicely pointed out.
Exactly. So this is also in Atomic Habits as well, but it's like either make something more enjoyable or make something, I guess, unattractive would be the way that he puts it in the book, is that you need to make making coffee at home more attractive than going to Starbucks.
Positive reinforcement.
Exactly. And I think the biggest thing about this is that you, if I tie it back to Atomic Habits, is he has a great quote, which is, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. No single instance is going to transform your beliefs, but as the votes build up, so does the evidence of your new identity. And so the way that I think about this, so my friends and I, we've done multiple fitness challenges in the past, and we used to do just just weight every week, weight and body fat percentage. And we've done it, one time we did it where everyone put money into the pot, and whoever had the biggest percentage change of body fat percentage would get the pot. And that it kind of worked, but it wasn't really motivating for most of us. And the intrinsic actual change over time was what's really kept most of us to stick to it. And so the last time we did it, we actually focused on habits a little bit more. And then we're actually doing it again this year, and we're kind of doing like mind, body, fit challenges. So it's like no spend, books read, and then whatever, each person has their own sheet that is tracking their own habits. So for me, it was like how many drinks each week, that's an input. How many steps or workouts, things like that. And so changing them so that the way that I had first heard about this, this guy on this podcast was talking about how he, in his head, thought that he worked out like 3 days a week. And in reality, he really only worked like, on average, half a day a week. If you really count, some weeks it was 0, some weeks it was 4, some weeks it was 2. And so, that consistency of the input is what really makes a difference. And he was like, I'm working out every week and I'm not losing any weight. And I think he was at like 40% body fat. And he was just trying to figure out, it's going up, it's not going down. And, regardless of what that goal is, I think that happens. Like, I've been focused on getting out of debt. And that's another one of those goals that you can't just do one, like, oh, I paid one payment. Now I'm, only one step closer to getting out of debt. And so you have to build up a whole bunch of these tiny habits that then track to that external goal.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. No, I feel like I am one of many, many people who are trying to get rid of that COVID-19. The drinking, the food, the whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, God. Crap.
Yeah, and I don't mean to focus on fitness, but it was something that we just did. And what's interesting is the outputs don't just then have to be weight and body fat. So in ours, we actually did identity statements as well. So, the habits aren't enough on their own. You need, like James Clear's quote, you need those habits to be votes towards the identity that you wish to have, right? And so the joke is, like, if you don't run, are you a runner? If you don't cycle, are you a cyclist? Those kinds of things. A lot of us have identities that are things that we used to do and we don't do anymore, right? So, like, for me, I used to cycle a lot. I don't anymore, so am I still a cyclist? There's no evidence of that identity. If I want that again, then I simply have to start cycling again. But, we've encouraged everybody to create an identity that then can have different outputs and inputs. So the outputs could be energy level, it could be morale, it could be, honestly, if you're focused on like a business one, it might be your salary or however much you're making from your freelance business, right? And figuring out how much money you're going to make requires different inputs. It's not just hours worked. And that's how we're going to tie this back into time tracking, is that time is simply one of those inputs. Because you could work 24 hours a day and never sleep, but now you're going to have a really messed up input, that isn't going to map to your output. So you're going to burn out before you see any results, and you're really not going to have a good time in general.
Right. Well, and you're also going to see, if you can measure those inputs and say, the amount of hours that I sleep and what the productivity of your day, that's an output, right? Like double checking I've got this right.
Yep.
So if you're affecting how much you sleep, how many hours of the day, and what, or how many hours of the day you work, and then have that output be your productivity, which is at the end of the day going to result in, a house, right? In one example, or having lost weight, another example, or in this, how many clients I can take on, or how much income I'm actually bringing home or staying home with at the end of the day.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a subtle tweak to everything, but a friend of ours actually had shared something that, again, like lined up with this. So a shout out to Rachel Gattuso, but she had mentioned this idea that, like, I think most people focus on that success rather than creating a framework that helps you step towards it. I'm paraphrasing here, but it was some Instagram post that she had made, and it's something that I think most people realize when they get burned out. They realize this isn't working. Let me step back. And I really do think that time tracking is one of the ways that you can do this. To keep up the fitness metaphor, it's very much like calorie tracking. And the nice thing about this is that you don't have to do it forever. So we'll jump into some of the tools that you can actually use. But what I think is important is that, just like intuitive eating, most people don't understand how many calories they're eating, just like most people don't have any clue how much time they're actually spending on a project. And so what we have an exercise that we're going to leave you with right before the giveaway, but we're going to go through a bunch of time trackers that we use, ones that our members love. They're not all digital. Some of them are bullet journal style ones. Some of them are simply just writing it down. But I think the big thing is that if you don't know where your time is going, then you can't tweak it. You can't change it. You can't optimize it.
And also, like, a little side note to that is, some of our members love. So these are also time tracking, like so many other things in tracking of anything, is so personal that you might try, like Timular. We've got members that absolutely love the Timular system, and
Hmm.
there's other members who have tried it. I know someone who created their own 3D printed version of it, but it didn't work out, right?
Yeah,
So everybody has their own personal preferences as far as what's going to work best for them. But these are some really, I think these cover quite a variety of options out there.
definitely. So let's jump over. I've used lots of time trackers. What's interesting is that some of them work for a while and then you have to find another one. And this just might be my obsession with tools, but the best
Mm.
one to use is the one that you actually use. And
Mhm.
there are some studies out there that believe like any system that you eventually find will eventually stop working. And the reason why we do jump from tool to tool is that we almost have to. But it could just be that this is what happens when you work in front of a computer too long.
Mm.
So let's jump over. I'm going to do some screen sharing here. So the first one we're going to talk about is Timular. So this is actually a physical device and software, which is very unique. What's cool about it is you have this 8-sided cube, which is not a cube, so it'd be an 8-sided polyhedron of some sort,
Yeah.
an octahedron, that you can write on the different sides with like an expo marker, and you assign it to the software. So you can have this on your iPhone, on Mac, PC, and simply turning it to the side that you're working on. This could be a client, it could be an activity like a meeting, a call, a break, lunch, whatever it is. It will automatically start tracking that. And then I think you'd stand it up on its end to stop tracking. So that is really interesting because some people need that physical like appearance of time, that they can remember to change it. I think that's been my biggest thing is like I'll start the time tracker and the whole day will go by and then I forget to turn it off and it's been tracking for like 12 hours. So this is
Yep.
just a visual reminder that you're
Well, and
doing your work.
physical
Yeah,
and visual. But I guess you can do it without. You can do the system without the physical
correct.
octo thingy. But this has that element of physicality that some people, based
Yeah.
on the way that you learn or the way that you interpret, interact with the world. So
So this is what the app actually looks like. So I signed up for a new account. This is my actual one. But what's really cool is that you can create as many activities as you want. Obviously, the cube only has 8 sides to it, so you can only assign so many. And I would say that's a good thing. I think Chris and some other folks have said that, like, hey, I need another side. It's like you probably have a few too many things going on if you're trying to track 8 things at once. But it might make sense for you to have one for work and one if you want to track like fun things or whatever. In my case, I actually don't use the cube, so I just use the software. But it has been one of the better ones that I've enjoyed using, mostly because like when I'm doing, like, let's just say right now we're doing the show. When I am going to record what I'm doing, I just hit play next to the Arena Collective. And what I like about this is that it looks like a calendar. So earlier I said like your Google Calendar or Outlook calendar, whatever you're using, is what you hoped to do. And sometimes
right.
I'll go in and put in my work and different projects, but then this is what actually happened. And so you just let this run, and if you're using the cube, you just turn it to the side, and it will just start doing this for you. And then when you hit stop, I think it needs to run for a few minutes before it'll let me. So let's just pretend like it ran for an hour. Then you can write a note. So let's say work in progress show, and then you can create that. And if you're doing billing, then you can jump into the report tab and then go check for like the month, the day, the week, whatever it is you're billing by each client, by each activity. If you pay for the tracker and you have the paid software, you can actually create different spaces. So in my case, I just have one space, but you could have multiple spaces that you flip in and out onto the. So you can have like a set of 8
Right.
and another set of 8 and swap them back and forth onto the different sides of your tracker. So this is what the tracker
Right.
looks like. It's a cool little device, and yeah, we're a big fan. The cool thing too, I use the free version. I didn't buy the thing, and I don't pay for the software, so it does work well for what I use it for. When I was doing a lot of client work, you would just see all the clients listed. But some people need to track like calls versus meetings versus emails, and that's a different way that you could use it for sure.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, I like the fact that you could show your calendar side by side. With a lot of these tools, you will be able to see that where you can actually go back and do that audit and say this was my expectation or what I
Mm-hmm.
had, what I set forth to do, and then realizing in that review, in that audit, what you actually spent your time on, and thus the intentional and accidental priorities. So
Definitely.
nice, clear way of looking at that.
So that is Timular. So just to re-echo for anyone who's just joining us, we're going to be doing a giveaway for the Timular. If you just put the word time in either YouTube or Twitch chat, we will be doing that towards the end of the episode. So another one that I know is really popular is Toggl. So Toggl. I will admit to not using this one myself, so I don't have a whole lot to talk about here. But I think, again, like we mentioned, different apps work really well for different people. So I would honestly spend some time, download all of them, and see which one works best for you. I don't have any pros and cons for this one other than it's very popular and very, especially with freelancers, very popular. Next up, we have Harvests. This is one that I have used in the past. For me, I think it's like $12 a month for the lowest level. It does your invoicing and your time tracking for you, so it's really powerful from that perspective. And if you're looking for all-in-one, then that's the way to go. Timular, as far as I know, does not do invoicing or anything like that. I'm sure they're probably looking at it, but then you could export your time from Timular and put it into QuickBooks or whatever you're using for invoicing.
I wonder if it's a side note, but thinking about that, I wonder if a lot of the different time trackers are doing that simply because with the pandemic, when you're working from home, if you're working for a organization, so you usually work in the office in the town that you live in, and right now you're working from home, the expectation of having time tracking versus being in an office where there's that sense of like, oh, someone could look over my shoulder, even though there is a lot of, Facebooking and water cooler moments at work in an agency or an office or whatever. Having something like this gives you a little bit more control over, if you're the boss, I guess, over what other people are doing, but then also reporting back and being able to share what you're doing. So it's not just for freelancers.
Yeah. And I think that's the distinction too, is I know that it feels very robotic to record everything that you do. We'll show a couple others in a second, but we'll just jump to the exercise. The exercise that I would encourage everyone to do is to spend an entire month tracking everything you do, especially if you are a freelancer. I wouldn't say that you need to go track everything you do when you call it done for the day, but definitely when you're working, track all of that time. One, to see that if you are working 10, 12-hour days, like that's not great. You're going to burn out, but also to see like, okay, maybe I am working 10-hour days. Are my invoices reflecting that? Am I actually getting paid for the time that I'm working? Maybe you want to work more, that's fine. But most of the time people are working way more hours than they're getting paid for. But if you're also thinking like, hey, I really wanted to get this thing done, but it just every month goes by and it's still not done. Are you actually spending any time on it? Like this will show you very quickly, like, yeah, you're only putting in like 5 minutes every morning at this thing. And maybe that's enough for some projects, but if you're maybe you're building an app on the side of whatever you're doing, or you're trying to write a book or whatever, and you've only put in a little bit of time into it, then it shows that you didn't do the inputs required to get the output that you're hoping for. And I think, some of the things that you've been doing, you may be doing just because it's something that you always did. And so figuring out where that time's going, you might find yourself just surprised that like, yeah, I always bill 2 hours for that type of work. And but it always takes me 4. So maybe it's time to think about changing that.
Yeah, and your 10, 12-hour day might be at the end going, what the hell did I spend my time on? And going back and realizing you're following down rabbit holes. And it could be easily you find an article and then you find 15 more, but then it's actually not
Yeah.
quite, pertinent to that project. Or it's just hours and hours spent responding to emails, and you need to be a little bit more strict and structured about how you do emailing and things like that. So yeah, tells you a lot. An audit will tell you so much more than you want to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And, Annie uses an app that actually tracks everything on her computer. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of these make you turn them on and off. The way that hers works, it's kind of like a law office where it tracks which files you have open. So she knows based on the name of the client in the top of the document what she's been spending time on. She knows how much time she spent on writing, how much time she spent on email. She's not starting and stopping, so it's very different. I can't remember the name of the app that she uses, but there's one
I
called.
thought it was Harvest.
It wasn't Harvest.
Maybe not. Okay.
Harvest does require you to start and stop, but there's one called Rescue Time that will show you like you spent an hour and a half in Facebook. It'll go down to like the website level, but also like you were also in Instagram and all these different types of things, right? So it depends on what you're struggling with. Some people are struggling with the rabbit holes of social media. Sometimes that's warranted. Sometimes it's just, again, like if you get in the flow state, you're like, oh, I've been editing videos and that only took me 2 hours. You're like, that was 8 hours that you were doing that. And you should bill for that. So just things to think about. The last one I'm going to put up here is Bonsai. So Bonsai has time tracking, but it also does everything else. It does expenses, projects, contracts, proposals. So there's a whole bunch of things that you can do with this. I use Bonsai as my invoicing system. That's why it's up here. But what's funny, their time tracking, it's just too clunky for me. So I use Timemuller, or at least when I used to do this, it would be Timemuller and then put the numbers into Bonsai. It worked fine. Yeah. But if you really like having everything in one place, you could time track in Bonsai, and those things just show up on your projects and stuff like that too. So different options for different people. Again, it's all going to be very individual taste for what works for you and what doesn't.
One of the problems I always had with time tracking when I was doing freelance work was, or even working in an agency, when you had to like outline where all of your, some agencies break it down to 5 minutes, like a lawyer's office. But the time and energy that it takes to fill in what you did, which is one of the things that I like about Timemuller, is that being able to just physically turn it around. But it also takes 10 times the amount of time to go back at the end of the month and then do your time card and figure out where you were. And it is better to learn the system, take the time in the beginning to learn the system, take the hit as far as time and such to, you might be doing less work, or you're taking time away from other things to learn a program or learn a system, but it will pay off.
Yeah. Yeah, what you just said kind of reminded me, we do work cycles, which we can try to link in chat as well. And it's like an informal way of doing time tracking. I think what I really like about work cycles is it's the input-output framework all over again. You set up, you can do 20 minutes, you can do 50 minutes, whatever you want, but you have sprints of dedicated focused work. So you know that the time that was in that cycle was dedicated to that thing. You can't put 2 things in there, there's only one thing. And there's always a break at the end of it. And so it's almost like instead of worrying about how long you were spending on it, you try to get the thing done in that amount of time instead. And maybe it takes 2 of those to get your project done or your task done, but at least you know how much time it took. And I do think that looking back on some of those, what I like is that you can write in, like, how did it go? How were you feeling? All this type of stuff that most of us don't think about when we're doing projects, right? They don't think like, did I enjoy doing that? Was my energy high? Did I not sleep well last night? There's all these different distractions that happen. And it just gives you a more intentional look at work that, I think is a little too intentional. Like, you can't do work cycles all day, every day. You'd burn out. Yeah. But doing one a week, one session a week or something like that can really help. So more things to check out, more tools.
Yeah. And intention. Intention is really important. Might as well be intentional with your time and your efforts and make it all the risk of sounding cheesy, make it count.
Make it count. Yeah,
Make it
and
count.
the thing with the inputs, I mean, I've seen this in my kind of debt payoff, in my fitness, in my work. They are all surprisingly related. Like a lot of people don't want to think about the fact that like maybe making coffee at home and making sure that you go into bed on time and you're getting up on like all those things, they end up paying off. Like you're for me it was like saving money to make food at home, which took a little bit of time, but that made me plan my day differently, which then means you're saving money, eating better. There's just all these things end up feeding into each other, and some inputs become outputs, and some those outputs become inputs into something else. So, good times.
Now we're getting into mind mapping and God.
Awesome.
Alrighty.
That's time tracking in a nutshell. I think
Yep.
The big thing, and we'll bring it back to money again, is that like budgeting, time tracking doesn't sound fun, but if you do it, it gives you the freedom to do more things. It gives you the freedom to get paid for your time, to know where it's going, to spend. We're going to be doing a future episode on energy audit, which is going to be interesting because it's looking backwards and looking at what gives you energy and what doesn't. And I think that's also important to think about. It's like you're like, hey, yeah, I really am trying to, spend time with family, but then you look at your calendar. It goes back to where we started with show me your calendar and I'll show you your priorities. So you gotta put it on the calendar.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So I don't know if I have seen anybody, if anyone is watching out there. No one has put the word time into chat. So if that is the case, then we will hold on to this for a future episode and we can give it away.
Okay.
Or we can tweak this a little bit and then maybe even do it over a few shows. So we could do like the end of January. So if you are watching, let's do that. If you're watching and you're not Suting, since Suting is the sponsor of our giveaway.
Yes.
I guess you could win. You could win your prize. But go ahead and put time in the chat, and we'll do we'll do that the rest of this month, and at the end of January, the last episode, we will do the giveaway then. So.
Now, if someone listens to the show as a recording, they could put a comment that says time.
Yeah, you know what? Let's do that. We're gonna do this across Twitch, YouTube, and we'll open up to Instagram too, I think.
Okay.
So we're
gonna try it out, people.
We'll post this out there, and we're changing the terms of the giveaway, but no one's entered yet, so it's good. We are gonna do the last episode of the month, which I don't have a calendar in front of me, but we'll figure it out. The irony, we have so many time trackers in front of me.
Oh no.
And we will do that. So Instagram, Twitch, if you're watching the recording of this, if it was useful, definitely post the word time. And if you have any habits that you're working on in pursuit of certain goals, whether they're personal or business, definitely share those with us as well. And I don't know what we're talking about next week. Do you, Rachel?
Oh, yes. Digital maximalism or minimalism. I might have yes.
Both?
Essentially that. So we're talking about both. Yeah, exactly. Pros and cons. We'll get a little more in depth, but
awesome.
Yes,
cool.
That's what we're going to be talking about.
Because
there are pros and cons. So.
Well, we'll do that. So if you are new finding us, definitely we'd love if you could give us a follow, like, subscribe on all the places. So this is on Twitch at twitch.tv/Reno Collective or on YouTube. We are still working on getting our name on YouTube. So if you could give us a follow, it is a long link that we will post in chat. But if you give us a follow, then we will be able to get a nice like YouTube/Reno Collective in the future.
That would be pretty.
Share with your friends. Thank you.
We're 1/3 of the way there.
We're actually almost halfway there.
Almost halfway.
Yeah. So,
all right.
Very cool. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Good to see you, Zach.
Turn off the news and relax tonight.
Yes, try to relax tonight. Start the time tracking tomorrow. Don't worry about it tonight. And we'll see you guys all next week. Thank you.
Bye.